Hello, I'm Justine Willis-Towns. Welcome to the New Dimensions Cafe. Today I'm hosting Dr. Tara Cousineau. She's a clinical psychologist at Harvard University's Counseling and Mental Health Services and is the author of The Perfectionist's Dilemma. Learn the art of self-compassion and become a happy achiever. Welcome, Tara, to the New Dimensions Cafe.
Hi, Justine. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. I'm wondering, would you consider perfectionism an epidemic in today's society as fed by powerful social narratives such as advertising, social media? We have to be beautiful or we have to have status or wealth. And so, what is necessary for health and happiness as referring to perfectionism?
Well, I definitely know that is on the rise. That's what the research shows over the last 30 years. And we are marinating in a stew of bigger, better, more. We can't get around it. And so there are a lot of social, cultural pressures to keep striving, and it's pretty relentless.
And so we have these voices that are telling us that we must do better, that we're not good enough.
It's interesting with perfectionism because a lot of people think that that's actually a great quality to have. It's their favorite flaw. And yet, what we know is that perfectionism is really a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for depression. It's a recipe for the inner critical voices that are nagging at us all the time. And when we become aware that perfectionism might be doing more harm than good, that is absolutely an opportunity of self-awareness and to start to make some changes in our lives.
How do we recognize that we're actually swimming in this water of
Yeah.
perfectionism?
Well, I think people often identify as a perfectionist, or else they have this challenge that they never feel like they're good enough. They might not call themselves a perfectionist, but they sort of have the not good enough doldrums, if you will. And I always say when they're not self-aware, their body will let them know, because what will happen over time is the stress will accumulate, and the stress will show up as increased cortisol in the body, inflammation, IBS, migraines. On the physical side of things, on the mental health side, it can manifest as anxiety or depression, body image concerns, eating disorders, you name it. It can manifest in these other ways that are pernicious. So, what do we do about it? That is a really tall order. It's like, what do we do about world war? I mean, perfectionism is everywhere. And I believe that when people can be more aware of how they are being sold, the messages around attractiveness, youthfulness, athleticism, wealth, that it's a false narrative, that is a beginning. I think what happens for people is that they want to have good things in their life. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's this pressure to have the best of everything and wanting more, the bigger house, the perfect spouse, the right number of kids, the right degrees, making a certain kind of income. It's just not reality. And you then really miss out on the things that actually really matter in life, like your quality of life and the quality of your relationships and your friendships. So it's it's um it's like a tightrope. I say perfectionism is a tightrope.
The mind of the body, that I think that's so important because we live in our heads so much, our intellect, our rational thinking. It's so highly touted in this culture.
There's definitely a mind-body connection that we need to pay attention to. And with perfectionism, people who have adopted perfectionism as a coping strategy, it's really a protective strategy, right? They're trying to mitigate social shame. They're trying to offset criticism. They're trying to avoid punishment in some way. It's really an understandable solution to a problem in life. But the solution is not a great one because of the costs that come along with perfectionism. And it's interesting, when you look at the researcher, the researchers who study perfectionism, these are the number crunchers in the world, and they're looking at the numbers over the years. There's several types of perfectionism. There's self-oriented perfectionism. That's what I would consider myself. Like I set the bar high for myself. Like I am my own worst critic, and I'm always trying to set the bar higher. Now, there's nothing wrong with that to a degree, but there's that kind of, where it's just self-motivated. And then there's other oriented perfectionism, which is people who expect everybody else to be perfect, right? And want things done right and on time and that sort of thing. That's sort of the stereotype that we might see in movies like with like The Devil Wears Prada, right? The character of Miranda, and then there's socially prescribed perfectionism, which is that I call it the compare and despair perfectionism, is that the yardstick isn't ours, it's society's, it's our peers, it's social media. And that type of perfectionism is associated with more significant mental health distress. It's more likely that it will be associated with anxiety or body image concerns or depression and eating disorders. And that type or, that category, if you will, of perfectionism has been on the rise. And it's got the same trajectory as the beginning of the introduction of the smartphone. Like, no surprise here. Like, no one's going to say there's a causal relationship, really, but like, there's definitely a correlation that with the introduction of smartphones and social media, all of a sudden we're hit with all of these societal expectations, 24/7. Everyone's is being more performative now. And so you can see that, oh yeah, perfection's been on the rise at the same time that smartphone use has been on the rise.
You give examples in your book of different people that you've worked with through the years and done. And there's this one, I can't remember his name, but he was highly motivated to do everything perfectly. And it just alienated his coworkers. Do you recall who I'm talking
Yes,
about?
I actually, it's so funny. I just wrote an article on Substack about this character. This is all composite, right? I think this is Lewis that you're talking about, and the neuroscientist who had such high expectations of his research team and his coworkers, and was incredibly demanding. And what happened was that he got called into the HR, into human resources. Now, this story I've heard so many times, it is really a composite where you might not be aware that what you're doing, your perfectionism is harming others, but it gets reported. This is not uncommon, actually. And so all of a sudden he had this kind of, moment in his life where he had to really do some reckoning because he was basically going to be, watched now for his behavior towards his coworkers. And his story was really interesting, and it was really around, having grown up in a really difficult neighborhood, having to be, protecting oneself from, gangs and things like that, where he just had learned how to be a fighter. And that wasn't helpful in his career. That would be the other oriented perfectionism category, is that your expectations for others. And it was actually really affecting his health. He ended up in the emergency room several times, thought that he had a brain aneurysm, then he thought he was having a heart attack. And this is where what you were referring to before a little bit, another book, but The Body Keeps the Score, is that when you don't recognize that this could be harmful to you, your body's going to shout it out loud, which is also kind of what happened to me when I was in my early 30s. I realized that I was so tightly wound that I was starting to feel nerve pain in my face, and I thought I was having a stroke and ended up in the ER as my small children were watching me be carted away by an ambulance. And that took time for me to recognize, like, what is going on in my life that I am so stressed with doing and achieving that I'm ending up in an emergency room. It's a common story. And so if we're not aware of it, something will make us aware of it. It will either be other people or it will be our bodies.
When we become aware of certain syndromes that we're doing or the way that we're practicing perfectionism, and we won't even call it that, but our practices that we're doing, whatever they are, you suggest that we get to know them and even name them. So, what's the purpose of naming these different ways that we react in the
Yeah,
world?
I think the first step is noticing the inner narratives, is noticing that inner critical voice. And, I have my own little archetypes and the inner bully, the inner judge, the inner detective, the inner nitpicker, and the joy thief. Those are the common ones that show up in my office. So I always say my clients come in with their plus one, which is usually one of these internal patterns or parts of us, is to really just notice that they're there and to get really curious about them. When did they show up? How are they trying to protect you? Is there a positive intention for their behavior? What is it? What could it be? And so that's that, noticing part of it is just that it's a pattern in your life. It's a part of you. It's a script that you absorbed or learned as a way to help you at one point, as a way to protect you. And then to kind of unpack that, maybe name that part. I have a temper tantrum part from very early on that I call my inner Scarlet, after Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. It was my mother's favorite novel. And, to notice when Scarlett's showing up. It's not all of me, but it's a part of me that gets really riled up when I see unfairness happen. And so when we can be a little bit playful about it, we can start to cultivate a relationship with ourselves, right? Because we all have more than one self tucked in there. Um, and then the next step is really to be kind, to nurture that part, notice, name, and nurture. And that's really where the self-compassion piece comes in, which is the subtitle of my book, Learn the Art of Self-Compassion and Become a Happy Achiever. And that takes a lot of practice.
There's a movie called The Help, and
Mhm.
in that movie, there was a black woman who was working as a nanny to a little white toddler.
Yes, I remember the movie.
It just stuck with me what she infused this little girl with a mantra for her life because she knew her life was going to be difficult. Her mother was difficult, and she
Yes,
knew it was going to be a difficult life. So she would say to this little girl, "You are smart. You are kind. You are important."
yes.
I love that.
It's so important to have our sort of, these cheerleaders in our life. And when we don't, we need to learn how to become them to ourselves and find them in our adult lives. And there's a lot of research also on, affirmations and the importance and the benefit of affirmations. And the affirmations need to resonate with you, right? It's not going to be like, oh, I love my body and it's beautiful. It really has to resonate with you. And so I often work with people on creating their own kindness statements or empowerment statements, something that really resonates. And when people can't do that for themselves yet, like they're not ready to, I just have them add the words, I am learning to be kind to myself.
Oh, that really then makes it truthful because
Yes.
you can't, if you're not there already, then you have a sense of truthfulness. I am learning to be kinder, or I
Mhm.
am learning to
Yeah.
be smarter, or whatever it is that we're telling ourselves in
Yeah.
this
I'm doing
way.
the best I can with what I know right now. And it's so important to have to do this self-encouragement. And then, of course, to surround yourself with people who do that for themselves also and are good role models and and I always say that we need to kind of have our allies or accountability partners. Like, if you're going to text with your friends some of the positive things, that you see in each other, or name what's going well in your life, because we really need to kind of practice and bring our attention to those things.
Oh, exactly. To help each other find our joy levels
Yeah.
and say, what's making you joyful today?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like this is part of my work every week where it's like end the day and do a little scroll of your day in your own mind of, what was a joyful moment? What brought you some delight? What went well? What was a surprise? What was there a new learning, and to say it to yourself or to say it to your roommate or your partner, it really changes the whole inner dialogue.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tara, for being part of the New Dimensions Cafe today.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure and honor. I've been speaking with Dr. Tara Cousineau. She's a clinical psychologist at Harvard University's Counseling and Mental Health Services, and she's the author of The Perfectionist's Dilemma: Learn the Art of Self-Compassion and Become a Happy Achiever. If you want to learn more about her work, you can go to her website, taracousineau.com, and she spells her name Tara, Tara Cousineau, Cousineau, taracousineau.com. Or you can get there through the New Dimensions website, where you'll find over 1,900 programs in our archives at newdimensions.org. I'm Justine Willis Toms, and I want to thank you for joining us at the New Dimensions Cafe. And I invite you, please do join us again.